In the dimly lit room of a crumbling wooden house, 12-year-old Lily Matthews sat hunched over a piece of lined paper, her pencil trembling in her hand. Outside, the muffled sound of shouting and sporadic gunfire echoed through the night. Her once peaceful village of Grey Ridge had become a war zone, its serenity stolen by the Iron Fangs, a ruthless gang that now controlled every aspect of life. Her letter began simply, "Dear Mr. President, my name is Lily Matthews. I know you are very busy, but I need to tell you something important. My family, my village, my life, we're all in danger and no one will help us." She paused, her chest tightening as she thought about her father. His voice still echoed in her mind. "Never let fear stop you from doing what's right, Lily." But fear had consumed Grey Ridge. The gang ruled with brutal force, silencing anyone who dared to resist. Her father had been their first victim, dragged into the village square and shot for refusing to hand over their farm's meager harvest. Now, her mother worked long hours in the fields to keep her and her younger brother Sam alive. She continued writing, "My little brother is sick from drinking dirty water because the gang poisoned our well. My mother is doing everything she can, but it's not enough. The people here are scared, hungry, and too afraid to fight back. Please, Mr. President, if you don't help us, no one will." A sudden noise outside made her freeze. Heavy boots crunched on the gravel path leading to their door, and deep voices carried through the thin walls. Hastily, she folded the letter and tucked it into her shoe, the only hiding spot she could think of. She pressed herself against the wall as the gang's patrol passed by, their laughter and crude remarks cutting through the stillness. "Lily!" Sam's whisper came from the corner of the room, where he lay on a threadbare mattress. "Are they gone?" She nodded, though her heart still raced. "Yes, they're gone." Sam's wide, frightened eyes mirrored her own. At just 6 years old, he understood the dangers better than most adults. Every day they lived under the shadow of the Iron Fangs, who took whatever they wanted, money, food, and sometimes even people. But this letter, if it reached the president, could be their salvation. Clutching her shoe tightly, Lily whispered to herself, "You'll read it. You have to." Grey Ridge wasn't always a place of fear. Once it was a thriving farming village nestled in a lush valley surrounded by rolling hills. The fields teemed with life, families gathered for Sunday picnics by the river, and children raced through the meadows under open skies. Lily often clung to those memories, though they felt more like fragments of a dream now. The Iron Fangs arrived 2 years ago. Rumors had spread that the gang had been driven out of the nearby city and was searching for a new base of operations. Grey Ridge, isolated and defenseless, became their target. At first, they promised protection in exchange for small payments, but the facade quickly crumbled. Those who refused their demands faced violent consequences. Within months, the gang controlled everything: the farms, the markets, even the water supply. Lily's father, John Matthews, was among the few who tried to resist. "This is our home," he had said, standing tall despite the fear in his eyes. "They have no right to take it from us." He rallied a small group of villagers to refuse the gang's extortion, but their defiance was short-lived. One evening, the Iron Fangs stormed into their home and dragged John into the village square. Lily and her family were forced to watch as he was beaten and shot in front of the community. Lily was only 10 at the time, but she remembered every horrifying detail: the way her mother's screams pierced the air, the helpless cries of their neighbors, and the gang leader's chilling smirk as he declared, "This is what happens when you think you're above the rules." Since that day, Grey Ridge had fallen completely under the gang's control. The village school was shut down, the fields were left to wither, and the well, once a lifeline for the community, was polluted with waste. People were too terrified to fight back, and the local authorities turned a blind eye. The Iron Fangs operated with impunity, their power unchecked. For Lily's family, survival became the only goal. Her mother, Grace, took up grueling work in the nearby town to earn enough to feed her children. She returned home late every night, her hands blistered and her body exhausted. Meanwhile, Lily took on the role of caregiver for her younger brother, Sam. Once a lively and mischievous boy, Sam had grown quiet and frail. His health had worsened over the past few months, and Lily suspected it was due to the contaminated water they were forced to drink. Despite the fear and despair that surrounded her, Lily refused to give up hope. She had heard stories about leaders who had brought justice to oppressed people who had fought for the powerless. She believed that the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the country, could be one of those leaders. If only she could get him to listen. Late at night, after Sam had fallen asleep and the house was cloaked in silence, Lily would sit by the light of a flickering candle and draft her letter. She wrote and rewrote it countless times, making sure every word carried the weight of her desperation. She knew the risks. If the Iron Fangs discovered her efforts, it could mean death for her entire family. But she also knew she couldn't stay silent. One evening, as she was sealing the envelope, Grace came home earlier than usual. The moment she stepped through the door, Lily knew something was wrong. Her mother's face was pale and her hands trembled as she placed a small loaf of bread on the table. "Lily," Grace said quietly, her voice heavy with exhaustion and fear. "What is this?" Lily froze, the envelope still in her hands. It's for the president," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to send it." Grace's eyes widened in alarm. She glanced toward the window, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "Do you have any idea what they'll do to us if they find out?" she demanded, her voice rising. Lily met her mother's gaze with quiet determination. "Mom, they're already killing us," she said. "Every day they take more from us. If I don't do something, we'll never get out of this." Grace's shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked as if she might collapse. Then she pulled Lily into a tight embrace, her tears soaking into her daughter's hair. "You're so much like your father," she whispered. "I just don't want to lose you, too." The next morning, Lily set out for the post office. It was one of the few places the gang hadn't completely shut down, but she knew it was still dangerous. The Iron Fangs kept a close watch on everything that came in and out of the village, and any attempt to contact the outside world was seen as an act of rebellion. The postmaster, Mr. Harrison, was a kind but cautious man. He had lived in Grey Ridge his entire life and had seen the village's slow descent into despair. When Lily approached him with the letter, his expression turned grim. "Lily," he said, lowering his voice, "do you know what you're asking me to do? If they find out I sent this—" "They won't," Lily said firmly, though her hands trembled as she held out the envelope. "Please, Mr. Harrison, it's for the president. It's the only chance we have." Harrison hesitated, glancing around the empty post office. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he took the letter and slid it into the outgoing mail slot. "You're braver than most adults I know," he said. "I'll send it, but you need to be careful, Lily. Don't let anyone see you here." If you are enjoying the story till now, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It costs you nothing, but for us, especially in these early days, it means the world. Let's continue. "Thank you," Lily whispered, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and fear. As she turned to leave, a shadow fell across the doorway. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Standing there was Marcus, one of the Iron Fang's enforcers. His tall frame and cold eyes made him an imposing figure, and the sight of him sent a shiver down her spine. "What are you doing here, kid?" Marcus asked, his voice low and menacing. Thinking quickly, Lily clutched her stomach and groaned. I wasn't feeling well," she said. "Mom said to come see if Mr. Harrison had any ginger for tea." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. "Fine, but don't hang around." Lily nodded quickly and darted past him, her heart pounding as she made her way back home. She didn't dare look back. All she could do now was hope that her letter would reach the president, and that he would care enough to help. The days after Lily sent her letter were filled with unbearable tension. She went about her chores as usual, fetching water from the contaminated well and tending to her brother Sam, but every sound outside made her jump. The Iron Fang's patrols seemed more frequent, their presence a constant reminder of the danger her family lived in. Her mother, Grace, kept glancing at Lily with worried eyes, but she said nothing about the letter again. Lily knew her mother was terrified, But she also knew Grace understood why she had taken such a risk. For Sam, for their future, for hope. Several hundred miles away, the letter left Grey Ridge in a battered mailbag. It traveled through several towns before finally reaching a large government mail sorting center. Among stacks of bureaucratic paperwork, advertisements, and complaints, Lily's handwritten envelope caught the eye of Margaret Bennett, a junior aide in the president's office. Margaret opened the envelope out of curiosity, her eyes scanning the neat but childlike handwriting. As she read, her curiosity turned to horror. She reread certain lines, her hands trembling slightly. "My little brother is sick because the gang poisoned our well. My dad stood up to them and they killed him in front of everyone." Margaret could feel the raw fear and desperation in every word. She immediately brought the letter to her supervisor, Charles Logan, who was in the middle of his afternoon coffee break. "Charles, you need to see this," she said, her voice urgent. Charles frowned as he took the letter. "What is it? Another generic plea for attention?" Margaret shook her head. "No, this is different. It's from a 12-year-old girl in Grey Ridge. The village is overrun by a gang. The details, they're horrifying." Charles read the letter in silence, his expression growing grimmer with every word. When he finished, he set the letter down and rubbed his temples. "Grey Ridge. That's the village near the mountains, right? I thought the police handled the situation there." Margaret's voice grew firm. "They didn't. According to this letter, the police have been bought off and the gang has complete control. People are dying, Charles. We can't ignore this." After a brief deliberation, Charles made the decision to elevate the letter to the president's chief of staff. By the next morning, it was on the president's desk. President Alexander Hayes was a man known for his meticulous attention to detail. His days were filled with meetings, briefings, and policy discussions. But when his chief of staff placed Lily's letter in front of him, everything else faded into the background. He unfolded the paper carefully, his eyes scanning the childlike handwriting. The president's expression shifted from curiosity to shock as he read Lily's words. When he reached the end, he sat back in his chair, his face pale. "How has this been allowed to happen?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. The chief of staff hesitated. "Sir, Grey Ridge is a remote village. The local authorities reported that everything was under control." "Under control?" The president's voice rose. "A gang is poisoning wells and murdering people in broad daylight, and that's under control?" He slammed the letter down on his desk. "This girl took a risk writing to me. If the Iron Fangs find out she sent this, her life is in danger. We need to act." The chief of staff nodded. "What do you suggest, sir?" President Hayes leaned forward, his tone resolute. "Send a covert team to investigate immediately. I want to know everything about this gang, their operations, and how deep this corruption runs. And when we're ready, I want a plan to take them down. Quietly, for now." Back in Grey Ridge, Marcus, the enforcer who had seen Lily at the post office, began to grow suspicious. The Iron Fangs had heard rumors of resistance before, and they dealt with it harshly. Now, Marcus's sharp eyes were focused on Lily and her family. One afternoon, as Lily fetched water from the well, Marcus approached her. His shadow loomed over her as he spoke. "You've been acting strange, kid. What are you up to?" Lily's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Nothing, sir. Just getting water for my brother." Marcus studied her closely, his eyes narrowing. "You better hope that's true, because if I find out you're causing trouble..." He let the threat hang in the air before walking away. Lily hurried home, her hands shaking so badly that half the water spilled from the bucket. When she told her mother what had happened, Grace's face turned ashen. "We need to lay low," she said, "for Sam's sake, for all our sakes." But laying low was impossible. Marcus's suspicions only grew. He began watching their home, questioning neighbors about Lily's movements. The pressure became unbearable, and Lily began to fear that her gamble had put her entire family in even greater danger. Meanwhile, the president's covert investigative team, led by Special Agent Claire Dawson, arrived on the outskirts of Grey Ridge under the cover of darkness. Claire, a seasoned operative, had read Lily's letter multiple times during the journey. She felt a deep responsibility to ensure the girl's safety. "We'll operate quietly," Claire told her team as they set up surveillance equipment in an abandoned cabin outside the village. "The last thing we want is to tip off the gang. Our priority is to confirm the situation and secure the girl and her family." Over the next few days, the team gathered evidence. Hidden cameras captured the Iron Fangs extorting money from shopkeepers, harassing villagers, and loading stolen goods into trucks. Claire's stomach churned as she watched a young boy, no older than Lily, being shoved to the ground for hesitating to hand over a loaf of bread. But the most damning evidence came when Claire intercepted a conversation between two gang members. "That Matthews kid," one of them said. "Marcus thinks she's up to something. If she is, she's dead meat." Claire's jaw tightened. They were running out of time. One night, as the village lay under the oppressive silence enforced by the Iron Fangs, Claire gathered her team. "We've seen enough," she said. "We'll extract the Matthews family tonight. Move quickly and quietly, no mistakes." Using the cover of darkness, the team infiltrated the village. They reached Lily's home without incident, and Claire knocked softly on the door. When Grace opened it, her eyes widened in fear. "Mrs. Matthews," Claire whispered. "I'm Special Agent Claire Dawson. We're here to get you and your children out of here." Grace hesitated, her eyes darting toward the shadows outside. "If they find out—" "They won't," Claire assured her. "We've been watching, but we have to move now." Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. "You came," she whispered. Claire knelt in front of her. "You're very brave, Lily, but we need to leave. Can you trust me?" Lily nodded, clutching Sam's hand tightly. The team moved swiftly, guiding the family through the darkened streets towards their waiting vehicles. But just as they reached the edge of the village, the sound of shouting erupted behind them. "They're on to us," one of Claire's team members said, his voice tense. "We need to move, now." The quiet night in Grey Ridge shattered as shouts and the heavy thudding of boots grew louder behind them. Lily clung to her younger brother Sam, her heart pounding with every step. Claire Dawson, leading the Matthews family and her team through the darkened alleys, signaled for them to quicken their pace. "Move faster," Claire whispered sharply to her team, her eyes darting to the shadows. "We're not far from the vehicles." But the gang had already realized something was wrong. A flare lit up the sky from the village square, casting eerie red light over the streets. The Iron Fang's leader, a towering man known as Vance the Wolf Harlow, barked orders through a megaphone. "Find them. I want that family alive. No one leaves this village without my say." Lily's legs ached, but she pushed herself to keep running. "We're not going to make it," Grace whispered, her voice choked with fear. "We will," Claire replied firmly, gripping her sidearm as they reached a narrow path leading to the vehicles. "Trust me, just keep moving." The convoy of black SUVs waited on the village's outskirts, hidden under a dense canopy of trees. Claire's team hustled the family into the lead vehicle, securing them in the back seat. As the engines roared to life, the first sounds of motorcycles grew louder behind them. "Hostiles incoming!" one of Claire's operatives shouted over the radio. "4 bikes closing in, more on foot." Claire clenched her jaw. "Engage only if necessary. We can't risk a firefight with civilians this close." The convoy sped down the narrow, winding road leading out of Grey Ridge. Lily pressed her face to the window, her eyes wide as the village faded into the distance. But relief was short-lived. The motorcycles were closing in, their headlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. Shots rang out, and one of the vehicles in the rear swerved, its tires blown by the attack. Claire grabbed her radio. "Vehicle 2, status?" "Disabled, but intact," came the reply. "We're holding position." "We can't stop," Claire barked. "Send backup." The lead SUV skidded around a sharp turn as the gang members continued their pursuit. Lily clutched Sam tightly, whispering, "It's okay, Sam. We're safe now." But even she wasn't sure if that was true. As the convoy reached an open stretch of road, Claire made a quick decision. "We'll create a diversion," she told her driver. "Pull over up ahead." The SUVs screeched to a halt. Claire and 2 of her operatives jumped out, taking defensive positions. "Go!" She shouted to the remaining vehicles. "We'll hold them off." Lily's SUV sped away as Claire and her team opened fire, forcing the gang to slow their approach. The sound of gunfire echoed through the valley, and for a moment Lily felt a pang of guilt. She wanted to shout to Claire to tell her to come with them, but Grace's firm hand on her shoulder kept her silent. "Claire knows what she's doing," Grace said. "She'll be fine." Meanwhile, at the White House, President Hayes was monitoring the situation from a secure room. Reports from Claire's team came in sporadically, each one painting a grimmer picture. The Iron Fangs were more organized and dangerous than anyone had anticipated, and their reach extended far beyond Grey Ridge. "This is bigger than one village," the president said, pacing the room. "We're dealing with a criminal network that's corrupted local law enforcement and has a stranglehold on an entire region." The president turned to his chief of staff. "I want a full-scale operation to dismantle these bastards. Mobilize federal agents, bring in the National Guard if necessary, and secure aid for the people of Grey Ridge. But first, make sure Claire's team gets out safely." As the convoy approached a hidden checkpoint, Lily finally allowed herself to breathe. The sound of the motorcycles had faded, and the forest seemed to envelop them in a protective embrace. Claire's team had sacrificed their safety for hers, and she would never forget it. When the vehicles stopped, federal agents emerged from the shadows, ushering the Matthews family into a secure building. Lily's hands trembled as she stepped out of the SUV, but Claire's words echoed in her mind. "You're brave, Lily. Trust us." Inside, they were greeted by medical personnel and agents who assured them they were safe. Sam was whisked away to be treated for his illness, and Grace collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "We're okay now," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "We're okay." But Lily couldn't shake the fear that the Iron Fangs would find them. "What about Claire?" she asked one of the agents. "Is she okay?" "She's still in the field," the agent replied, his tone measured. "But she's one of the best. She'll make it." Hours later, Claire and her team arrived at the checkpoint, battered but alive. Lily ran to her, tears streaming down her face. "You're back," she cried. Claire knelt down and gave her a small smile. "Of course I am. I told you I wouldn't let anything happen to you." The evidence collected by Claire's team, combined with Lily's letter, sparked a national outcry. News outlets picked up the story, and the president addressed the nation in a heartfelt speech. "Lily Matthews' courage has reminded us all of our responsibility to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves," he said. "No child should have to live in fear, and no community should be abandoned." Federal agents launched a massive operation to dismantle the Iron Fangs. Dozens of gang members were arrested, corrupt officials were exposed, and aid poured into Grey Ridge to help rebuild the village. Months later, Lily and her family returned to Grey Ridge, now free from the gang's control. The schoolhouse reopened, and the fields began to flourish once more. Sam's health improved, and for the first time in years, Lily felt like a child again. One day, a letter arrived for Lily. It was from President Hayes. In it, he wrote, "Your bravery has inspired not just me, but the entire nation. Thank you for reminding us what it means to fight for justice." Lily held the letter close, a smile spreading across her face. She had once feared that her voice wouldn't matter. Now she knew it could change the world. The months following the Matthews family's escape marked the beginning of a national reckoning. The story of a 12-year-old girl who dared to write to the president had captured the country's heart. But for Lily and her family, life remained far from normal. They were safe in a government-protected shelter, but Grey Ridge still felt like home U 2014, a place they longed to return to. Meanwhile, the president's operation to dismantle the Iron Fangs was in full force, with Claire Dawson leading the charge. Back in Grey Ridge, the Iron Fangs were reeling. The extraction of the Matthews family had exposed the gang's vulnerabilities, and the arrival of federal agents only added fuel to the fire. Vance, the wolf, Harlow, was livid. His grip on the region was slipping, and he knew the government was closing in. "We've been too soft," Harlow growled at his lieutenants during a tense meeting in their hideout. This is war now. We need to send a message." The gang intensified its control over the village, punishing anyone they suspected of aiding the Matthews family. Shops were looted, homes burned, and threats grew even more violent. Fear and despair gripped the townspeople as they realized that the federal agents, while gathering evidence, hadn't yet intervened decisively. At the shelter, Lily couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at her. She thought of her neighbors back in Grey Ridge, still living under the Iron Fang's tyranny. "We're safe, but what about them?" she asked Claire during one of their debriefings. Claire knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Lily, I promise you, we're not giving up on Grey Ridge. The evidence we're gathering will bring them down for good, but these things take time." Lily nodded, but her heart felt heavy. "I just want them to be free," she whispered. Claire smiled faintly. "They will be, and it's because of you. You started something no one else dared to." As Claire's team worked around the clock, the president authorized a covert operation to dismantle the Iron Fang's network. Federal agents moved in silently, raiding warehouses, intercepting communications, and cutting off the gang's supply lines. Each strike brought them closer to the heart of the organization, Vance Harlow. But Harlow wasn't going down without a fight. Using the gang's ill-gotten wealth, he bribed local officials, hired mercenaries, and fortified his stronghold in the mountains near Grey Ridge. He also issued a chilling decree to his men: "Find the Matthews family and bring them to me." The shelter where the Matthews family was staying was heavily guarded, but the constant threat of being found loomed large. Grace tried to keep life as normal as possible for her children, but Lily could sense her mother's fear. Sam, still recovering from his illness, clung to Lily more than ever. One night, as they sat together in their small room, Sam asked softly, "Lily, do you think we'll ever go home?" Lily hesitated, then took his hand. "Yes, Sam, we will, and it'll be better than before, I promise." Her words were as much for herself as they were for her brother. She needed to believe that all of this, the fear, the uncertainty, the sacrifices, would lead to something better. Claire and her team soon uncovered a critical piece of information: Harlow's location. He had retreated to a heavily fortified compound in the mountains where he was planning his next move. The president gave the green light for an extraction mission, but it wouldn't be easy. Harlow's compound was surrounded by armed guards, and the risk of civilian casualties was high. "We need someone on the inside," Claire said during a strategy meeting. "Someone who can get close enough to confirm Harlow's presence before we strike." The room fell silent until one of Claire's operatives, Agent Morales, spoke up. "I know someone who might be willing. One of the villagers, an old friend of the Matthews family. He's been feeding us information from inside Grey Ridge." The federal agents weren't the only ones working against the Iron Fangs. In Grey Ridge, a quiet resistance was forming among the villagers. Inspired by Lily's bravery, a group of townspeople began sabotaging the gang's operations in small but meaningful ways. They destroyed supplies, spread false information, and secretly communicated with the federal agents. One of these villagers was Mr. Harrison, the postmaster who had sent Lily's letter. He had become a key informant, using his position to monitor the gang's movements and relay messages to Claire's team. Despite the danger, he refused to back down. "I'm too old to run," he told the other villagers with a wry smile. "Might as well fight for what's right." Using the information provided by Mr. Harrison and the other villagers, Claire's team developed a detailed plan to infiltrate Harlow's compound. The operation was set for the following week, but the stakes couldn't have been higher. If they failed, the consequences for Grey Ridge and for the Matthews family would be catastrophic. As the day of the mission approached, Claire visited Lily at the shelter. "We're close," she said. "Once Harlow is captured, it'll be safe for you and your family to go home." Lily's eyes lit up. "Really?" Claire nodded. "Really? But I need you to stay strong for a little while longer. Can you do that?" "I'll try," Lily said, a small smile breaking through her worry. The night before the operation, Claire and her team reviewed their plan one final time. The air was thick with tension but also with determination. They knew what was at stake, not just for Grey Ridge, but for every community the Iron Fangs had terrorized. Meanwhile, in the shelter, Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced with thoughts of Grey Ridge, of her father, of the life they had lost. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she clung to one certainty. She had done the right thing by writing that letter. "Dad," she whispered into the darkness, "I hope you're proud of me." The dawn of the operation came swiftly. The air was heavy with anticipation as Claire Dawson and her team prepared for what could be their most dangerous mission yet. Their objective was clear: infiltrate the Iron Fangs' mountain compound, capture Vance Harlow, and dismantle the gang's network once and for all. Inside the makeshift command center, Claire addressed her team. Maps of the compound were spread across the table, red marks highlighting entry points and key targets. "This isn't just about taking down Harlow," Claire began. "It's about sending a message. The Iron Fangs have terrorized Grey Ridge and beyond for too long. Today, we end that." Agent Morales, who had coordinated with the village informants, stepped forward. "The locals have confirmed Harlow is on site. He's heavily guarded, but we have a window to act while his men are focused on transporting supplies." Claire nodded, her jaw set. "We stick to the plan. No unnecessary risks. And remember, this isn't just about tactics. It's about trust. The villagers put their lives on the line to help us. Let's not let them down." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the team moved into position. Using the cover of darkness, they navigated the rugged terrain surrounding the compound. The faint hum of a generator and the distant chatter of guards carried through the cool mountain air. Claire signaled for the team to halt. She raised her binoculars, scanning the perimeter. Just as Morales had reported, the guards were focused on loading supplies into trucks near the compound's main gate. It was the perfect distraction. "Team 1, move in," Claire whispered into her radio. "Take the east entrance. Team 2, cover the perimeter." The operatives moved like shadows, their footsteps silent on the rocky ground. Within minutes, they breached the compound's outer defenses, neutralizing guards with swift precision. Claire led the charge, her focus unyielding as they advanced towards the main building. The interior of the compound was a stark contrast to its rugged exterior. The halls were dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of oil and sweat. Claire's team navigated the maze-like structure, guided by the intel provided by the villagers. As they approached Harlow's office, the tension grew palpable. The sound of footsteps echoed ahead, and Claire raised her fist, signaling the team to stop. A group of armed men rounded the corner, their weapons at the ready. "Engage," Claire ordered. The ensuing firefight was intense but brief. Claire's team outmaneuvered the guards, their training and coordination proving superior. As the last gunman fell, Claire turned to Morales. "Secure the area. I'm going after Harlow." Claire burst into Harlow's office, her weapon drawn. The gang leader stood behind a massive desk, his imposing figure silhouetted against the flickering light of a single bulb. He didn't look surprised. "So, you're the one causing all this trouble," Harlow said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "I've heard about you. Claire Dawson, right? The president's golden girl." Claire's eyes narrowed. "It's over, Harlow. Your men are done. Your operation is finished." Harlow chuckled, leaning casually against the desk. "You think you've won? This isn't just about Grey Ridge. My network reaches farther than you can imagine. You'll never shut us all down." Claire stepped closer, her grip on her weapon tightening. "You won't live to see it, Harlow." Before he could react, two of Claire's operatives stormed in, weapons trained on him. Harlow raised his hands, a smirk still plastered on his face. All right, he said mockingly. "You've got me, but don't think for a second this is the end." With Harlow in custody, the team began securing the compound. Files, weapons, and contraband were confiscated as evidence. The operation had been a success, but Claire knew the fight wasn't over. As the convoy of vehicles made its way down the mountain, Claire sat in silence, her thoughts on Grey Ridge. The villagers had endured so much, and while Harlow's capture was a victory, rebuilding their lives would take time. Hours later, Claire returned to the shelter where Lily and her family were staying. Grace and Sam greeted her with relief, but it was Lily's reaction that struck Claire the most. The young girl ran to her, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," Lily said, her voice filled with awe. "You stopped him." Claire knelt down, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. "We got him, but it was your bravery that started all this, Lily. You're the real hero." Lily's face lit up with a mixture of pride and hope. For the first time in months, she felt like her voice had truly made a difference. The capture of Vance Harlow marked a turning point not only for Grey Ridge but for countless other communities under the Iron Fang's shadow. News of the successful operation spread quickly, and President Hayes addressed the nation in a televised speech. "Today, we honor the bravery of a young girl who dared to speak out against injustice." Lily Matthews' courage and determination remind us all of the power of one voice. We will not rest until every community is free from the grip of fear and corruption. Lily watched the speech from the shelter, her family by her side. Tears filled Grace's eyes as she held Lily and Sam close. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "Your father would be so proud." In the weeks that followed, federal agents swept through the region, dismantling what remained of the Iron Fang's operations. Corrupt officials were arrested, and aid poured into Grey Ridge to rebuild the community. The schoolhouse reopened, clean water flowed from the well, and the villagers began to reclaim their lives. When it was finally safe, the Matthews family returned home. As their car rolled into Grey Ridge, Lily felt a mix of emotions. The village still bore scars of its dark past, but there was a sense of hope in the air, a promise of a brighter future. Neighbors greeted the Matthews family with hugs and tears, thanking Lily for her bravery. Mr. Harrison, the postmaster who had sent her letter, approached her with a proud smile. "You've done more for this village than anyone could have imagined," he said. "Never forget how much you've changed." Lily nodded, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time, she realized that her actions had truly made a difference, not just for her family, but for an entire community. One morning, as Lily sat on the porch of their newly repaired home, a government courier arrived with a special delivery. Inside was a handwritten letter from President Hayes. "Dear Lily, your bravery has inspired not just me, but an entire nation. Your letter reminded us of the power of speaking out against injustice, no matter the risks. Thanks to you, countless lives have been changed for the better. Never stop believing in the strength of your voice. With admiration and gratitude, President Alexander Hayes." Lily held the letter close, her eyes shining with emotion. She had once feared that no one would listen, that her voice wouldn't matter. Now, she knew better. As Lily looked out at the bustling village, she turned to her mother. "Do you think I could become a teacher one day, to help other kids find their voices?" Grace smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "You can do anything, Lily." And as the sun set over Grey Ridge, Lily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She had fought for her home, her family, and her future. And she had won.